glad to be here, my first Limud. And when I found out I was first in line to tell stories today, I thought, well, this is perfect. Because what better way to start off a Jewish storytelling program than with a story about the quintessential Jewish mother. That would be my mother. Years back, I was having a conversation with my mother. I was asking her some simple questions about life, like, what was the meaning of your life? And did you have any dreams that you didn't get fulfilled? Did you have any dreams besides being a housewife, which was mostly what she was most of her whole life? And without missing a beat, my mother said, dreams? What dreams? We never even thought about it. I always knew that I would get married and have a family. My goal in life was to take care of my husband and my children and to make sure I could put the most nutritious meals on the table that I could. And that, my mother did. Through her hands came food multiplied, came kneading and folding and stuffing, using a knife like it was another appendage. Simmering and roasting and stewing, perfection manifested. Imagine, if you will, making some dough, rolling it out into long strips, cutting them into smaller pieces, twisting them into little pretzels, putting them into a boiling mixture of honey and other stuff that I don't even know what was in there, and then tossing them, rolling them actually, into chopped pieces, hand-chopped pieces of walnuts. Does anyone know what this dish is? Teglach, there you go, very good. A wonderfully simple but time-consuming dessert. But the point is that almost everything my mother made, she made from scratch. I mean, who ever thought about making knedlach, matzah balls, from a box? Even if making from scratch was a patsky, which, as you all know, means a pain in the Duchess, that's right. Or other choice words, that's right. But it's so much more fun to say, it's a patsky, and you have to use your hands because we're Jews, so please get your hands ready and let's say it together. It's a patsky! My mother would agree. In fact, I just spoke to her the other day and I was asking her about the teglach recipe, and she said, why would you want to do that? It's such a patsky. I'm like, exactly. So food, meals, consumed a huge part of my mother's life. She would make everything, as I said, from scratch. Stuffed cabbage, strudel, cutting the strips, rolling it with the fruit mixture, putting the cinnamon and sugar, putting it in the oven, pot roast, whatever it was, and always chicken and chicken soup on Friday night, lest Elijah the prophet shouldn't come and grant us health and happiness. So food was an important part of her life, and she took it very personally. She was downright insulted if we didn't eat everything on our plate, right, Judith? Right? Which, for my mother, included an appetizer, a main dish, and not one, there had to be 2 vegetables on the plate, not to mention dessert every night for dinner. So how is it that I could go through my life and not be devoted to making things like stuffed cabbage and vegetable soup with copious amounts of meat in it, and milk and glass pie? When I cook, it's of the simpler variety. Stir-fried veggies, quiches, simple soups, and yes, the occasional Lakshan kugel. So, you might wonder how it is that a girl like me would grow up with a quintessential Jewish mother who spent 2/3 of her life preparing and cooking food for her family and not even know how to cook a turkey for Thanksgiving or chicken soup. It all had to do with the wave. Mom, can I help you cook dinner tonight? Nah, the food will never get done if you hurry up. I don't have time for that. You can cut the grapefruit. Mom, can you teach me how to make a filter fish, please? You can set the table. That would be a big help. And so today, I am a great table setter, grapefruit cutter, and salad maker. But I know almost none of my mother's recipes. In fact, I could truthfully say I know none of my mother's recipes. She has ignored my adult pleas over the decades to pass on this gift of these recipes, which are part of my cultural heritage, even though she doesn't have 6 people to make dinner for every night anymore. And over the years, as my mother got older, she continued to use the way, but the script changed. I can't be bothered with making everything from scratch anymore. It's a gunsa business, which, as you know, is another way of saying it's a pain in the tuchus. Or it's a hotchki. That's right. Well, many years ago, me and my sister Toby, we were down in Florida visiting my parents, and I worked my mother like a defense attorney, telling her of the merits of passing on this part of our cultural heritage, and miracle of miracles, it worked. She conceded. No gefilte fish, I'm afraid to say, but strudel was nothing to shake a finger at either. The moment came. Me and my sister, we were sitting there with pen and paper in hand, and my mother, she started to work that recipe like she was invoking some ancient ritual, not even stopping for explanation. Mom, let me do it so I can learn how. No, if I never do it, I have to do it myself. That's the only way I know how. Look, you have to put flour in your hands for the dough, or else the dough will stick to your hands. You understand what I'm saying? You understand what I'm saying? My mother would often punctuate her sentences with that, as if the operation in front of us was fit for an Einstein. In the meantime, me and my sister, we were frantically jotting down, scribbling down every piece of that recipe that we could, like students studying for a test, watching the master at her work, trying to soak up all these decades of knowledge and skill. Adult children, still on the outside, looking in, trying to soak up the wisdom of the years. Weeks after I got back from that Florida trip, I found that recipe that I had scribbled down in my mother's Florida home, and it made me smile, remembering the passion of her artistry, all of that mixing and chopping and cutting. It's part of my family heritage. It's part of who I am. It's meals eaten together and prayers chanted, and the taste and the smells of food and the sounds of my aunts and my uncles and my cousins at the dinner table, and even of the dishwasher running as we continued our conversation around the dining room table. All of that is part of who I am. There's a story in the Jewish tradition about the Baal Shem Tov, a great sage, a rebbe of his time and of our heritage. It is said that when the Baal Shem Tov had an important decision to make, he would go into the forest to a certain spot that he knew. And he would build a fire there, and he would sing songs and pray. And when he was done, he knew what he had to do, what choice he had to make. His successor did the same thing. He went to that same spot in the woods. He built the fire. He sang the songs. But he could not remember the prayers. And he knew that it had to be enough to make his decision. And it was. His successor went to the same spot in the woods when he had a difficult decision to make. He remembered how to make the fire. He remembered the place. But he forgot the songs and the prayers. And he knew it had to be enough. And it was. And his successor only remembered that place in the forest. And it was enough. I may never know all the details of my mother's gefilte fish recipe, or any other number of her other recipes, for that matter. But I do have the memory of it, and that's going to have to be enough. And you know something? It is. Because I realized that the recipe is really simple. It's called devotion. A devotion that came through my mother's soul and through her hands. And that, my friends, is the greatest gift I can imagine.